Welcome to Comic Wars. Think of the show as Fight Night, but without the mess of actual combat. The data will speak for itself before the outcome, but in case it doesn't, we will break all of it down in the outcome at the end of the show. Without further ado, let's dive right into our first competitor. So, first things first, before we technically dive into our first competitor, I just want to explain how the show breaks down. So first up, we're going to have guest intros and guesses from said guest if we have one. We don't actually have one today, so we're just going to skip past that. After that, we get into the background details. This is more or less where we kind of break down who the character is, personality-wise, maybe their occupation, height, weight, age, things like that. That data. After that, then we get into the feats. This is more or less the meat and potatoes of the episode for each character. This is going to be where we break down what they bring to combat. So, like their strength, their durability, their speed and agility, martial prowess, ingenuity, gadgets, powers, everything. This is more or less going to be the area. This actually gets combined with two other ones, which break down further as we go down the list. Which gets into data analysis. This is more or less breaking down the numbers, if you will. The science behind the fight itself. This is where things get explained. And after that, then we go over character pros and cons. It's going to be basically where we're tallying points. Who's more or less got the edge in which category and why. And after that, then we get into guest analysis. Once again, this will be the time where people get to kind of change their guesses. Who do you think wins now? After you get to see the data and why. After that, then we get into the outcome, and this is where we break down the fight, who wins and why. And you'd be surprised on some of them. There's sometimes the points really don't matter a whole lot, especially if one character just utilizes one of those categories and overwhelms. We've seen that last season, and in the first season, there was a couple times where characters are able to pull ahead just due to one category, just because it was so overwhelming. After that, then we get into the preview of the next episode, and of course announce the winner of tonight's episode. So let's get into our first competitor. So our first one tonight is going to be the Toxic Avenger. So his real name is Melvin Junko. There's other people that have said his real name is Melvin Ferd. I'm going off of what I got off of all the data that I actually had provided. So Melvin Junko was, well, the one name that just kind of stuck through everything. So we're going to go with that. As for his age, he's in his early 20s. Nobody really knows how old he is per se, but it's speculated he's at least in his early 20s. As for height, we had to do a little bit of calculation in this because, end of the day, they don't provide that either. Not in the comics, not in the movie, nothing. But he's roughly about 6'4" tall, and this is based on he's a little taller than Michael J. White. This is when he first started getting into film, and we got to see him face off against the Toxic Avenger, and they were roughly just a few inches different between their height. So we just did more of a kind of a rough guesstimate, if you will. As for weight, once again, it's another one that we kind of had to more or less figure out, what would this guy's weight be. And because the Toxic Avenger has actually been played by 3 different actors, this is where we kind of guessed his height based on that as well. Him being a little bit taller than Michael J. White, plus on top of that, different characters, their actual body weights, this is what we actually used. And then we just kind of adjusted to kind of reduce the range a little bit. So he's somewhere between 200 and 229 pounds. As for his occupation, he's, a mutant superhero who's operating in Tromaville, New Jersey. As for his personality, he's very, very friendly, he's naive, and he hates evildoers, including bullies. As for some little tidbits about him, he used to work as a janitor at a Tromaville health club. So his feats, let's break those down. I appreciate it, Catherine. Yeah, it's I'm still having some issues with latency and all that. So, like I said, it's more or less computer issue at this point. I do got to get it figured out. I'm pretty sure to be specific, I'm pretty sure it's a fan issue. But for the Toxic Avenger's strength, Well, he's capable of ripping off a criminal's arm, which takes roughly about 2,200 pounds of force. He's also punched a hole in a criminal's torso, which, depending on where he hits, it's really like if you just hit the soft stomach area, just to punch a hole into somebody, it doesn't take a whole lot. But to actually punch through bone itself all the way through the body, it's been recorded as at least about 45,000 psi on average, with thinner people being a little bit easier, while larger people being a little bit harder. It takes a little more force, so it's around there. As for durability, well, he survived explosions with no damage, and he is bulletproof, as we got to see in Toxic Avenger 1. And when he was shot at, he just doesn't do anything to him at all. Just more or less bounces off. As for speed and agility, he's capable of dodging bullets, which takes roughly about, depending on the bullet, of course, or the firearm and everything, it takes roughly about 1,700 miles per hour to at least be able to do that. This is just agility, not necessarily speed. Like when it comes to like running at somebody, this doesn't account for this. He's just that agile, and this is due to his agility being at least equal to Kabuki Man, who catches bullets with chopsticks. As for his martial prowess, he's got no actual training. For ingenuity, well, he relies heavily on his brute strength. And powers, well, he's got low-tier teleportation. Now, I want to break this down very quickly, because I put in there slasher tier. If you think of the movies like Halloween, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, where the killer is able to more or less get like the jump scare, teleport behind people, even though they were like pretty much right in front of it, just a short while ago, and just quickly get right, in the perfect position to go and strike. That's what he's able to do. So it's really interesting because he covers quite the distance at times too. And he's got superhuman strength, durability, agility, and stamina. He is capable of manipulating radiation, and he has an evil sense. So if somebody's pure, like they're truly evil, he'll be able to sense them out, but he also becomes more or less like focused in, like he's honed in on them and he has to take them out. And he's not like a typical superhero, where you see that they beat him up and then they kind of just let them get arrested. No, he typically kills them or maims them really, really badly. And he's also got an immunity to mind control. I found this one. Oh, sorry about that. Well, I appreciate it either way. I'm not exactly sure where this came from, as I didn't see this in the movie, so I think this is from the comics. It might have been from one I missed, but there were several different people documenting saying that he is immune to mind control or mental manipulation. So, like I said, this one I threw it in there because there was a lot of people saying this is what this is here, but I didn't see the proof of it. But overwhelming data showing that yes, he does actually have this, but like I said, no actual proof to it. I'm going to include it only just strictly because it was just a little interesting tidbit that a lot of people said, no, this is what this is. People had said from the comics, and people had said from the movies, but like I said, I didn't see it, but I'm just going to include it since there was just so much of it. I'm just going to include it for this, just in case. As for equipment, well, he's kind of got an odd piece of equipment. He comes with a mop. And he has a weakness, as he can't control his urge to kill evil people very well, and has even been seen to doubt himself if he's not sure if they really were evil or not. Like, he didn't find the evidence to prove they're evil. His evil sense is so strong, though, that I don't understand why he questions it, because every time he's questioned it, he's ended up being right. And it was kind of like a side gig or something like this, or maybe in their day job where he got him at, that was more or less a cover. So interesting, though. Our next competitor, though, is Jaws. His real name, we don't really know. He is portrayed by Richard Kiel, the late Richard Kiel. So, shout out to him. And we don't really know his age, but based on Richard Kiel itself, on himself, we're just going to go off of his age for this, just so we have something there. But he's roughly probably about 38 years old. He is 7 foot 2 inches tall. And he weighs in approximately about 300 pounds. As for his occupation, well, he's an assassin / mercenary. He's done multiple different jobs globally. And for his personality, this is where you'll see there's a huge difference here. He's very, very cunning. He's above average intellect. Now, he may not always be like the most intelligent character. He actually, more often than not, he does some like dumb things, like that literally cost him battles and things like this. But for the most part, when he utilizes his cunning, it's crazy. He outsmarts James Bond at times, and James Bond's known for being cunning, so he's also incredibly intelligent too. So, but he's also focused, and he's extremely professional. Now, this kind of plays into kind of how he operates. So, but a little tidbit about him: his professionalism is admired and even recognized throughout the entire 007 universe. He's even mentioned in some of the movies where he's not even in some of the books, some of the comics, things like that. He's mentioned even when he's not in there at times. It's kind of cool. Little shout outs to him, throughout his own content where he's not even there. As for his feats, though, so his strength, well, he's actually been shown on a number of occasions to be able to do things like bending solid steel bars with his bare hands. That takes at least 35,000 psi. He's bitten through a cable car steel cable. Now, just to break that, just to tear it a little bit, that's taken at least between, depending on on what the steel is, if it's mild steel or whatnot. This is where it kind of breaks down kind of weird, because it's going to take anywhere between 36,000 and 70,000 psi at least. And he was able to just chew right through it. He's also easily lifted a car. As for durability, well, he's easily withstood a gunshot and survived several different scenarios without a scratch, including explosions, electrocution, falling off cliffs in a car, which exploded, a massive building collapse with explosions, and a shark attack. As for his speed and agility, he's a little bit above average level. He's not a very fast guy. One could argue he's a little clunky when he's running around, except, now, we'll get into some of the other details about his speed, is it doesn't really matter a whole lot. It comes into some other factors here. So when it comes to his martial prowess, now he actually is more kind of advanced combat skills. I wouldn't argue he's like an expert or master, like some of the data has claimed. Everything I'd found, I would argue he's somewhere between basic and advanced combat skill for training. As he knows what he's doing. He knows where to strike, how to strike, but he's kind of slow and clunky, like I said before, does a lot of haymakers and things like that. But for his ingenuity, he does utilize his size and strength to overwhelm opponents, and actually often resorts to biting. If there's a bit of range between himself and his opponents, he actually will utilize things like firearms, such as his famous MAC-10 submachine gun. He's also extremely quiet and utilizes stealth takedowns to quickly defeat opponents, so he will get up close, and that's where he prefers, but he's known for his stealth takedowns. Like, don't even hear him coming, here he is, bam, and he goes right for the there. So, as for his powers, well, he's got superhuman strength and durability. It's hard to really argue he doesn't with looking at what he can do with his strength and his durability. It's not mere luck. Literally had entire, basically like a battleship type building just fall right in on him and came out unscathed. Just literally just swam right out. It's fine. As for his equipment, he brings the MAC-10 submachine gun, a flamethrower. Now, I found that was an interesting part, because not necessarily often, but he does bring that to a few of his battles when you wouldn't expect it. So I'm going to include that for this just because, well, he has brought it into a few battles, and it's been almost kind of game-changing at times. His MAC-10 submachine gun he's brought in multiple times. And then, of course, he always brings his razor-sharp steel teeth implants. All right. So, I'd like to go and start breaking down the points as we've already got the numbers here. So let's start breaking down the points where this is going. So, first up, it comes to background, his professionalism, just his know-how, how he operates, versus basically a kid with no real experience. Jaws, he's got a huge advantage here when it comes down to his intellect, his combat know-how, and his experience, all this, and even size, weight, all this. He overwhelms the Toxic Avenger on these things. I don't think there's really much to really cover past that because, like I said, everything Jaws is just superior in this entire category. Now, as for next point, this one's a little interesting. So, they are actually relatively close in strength. Now, this is coming from somebody who's actually been classified as superhuman, versus somebody who hasn't actually been classified as superhuman. Granted, there are times where it is mentioned, or at least hinted at, that Jaws is superhuman, and that is throughout the movies and novelizations, games, all that. But it's never really outright been like, yeah, he is superhuman. But you can see the data here, he'd have to be. But when it comes down to his strength, he is superior to Toxic Avenger, but he's not overwhelmingly superior. So this is going to be that's an interesting feat here. I didn't expect this at all. I honestly thought Jaws was going to be outclassed on this, and no, not even. Like I said before, you look at their actual feats of strength. Granted, when it comes down to it, Toxic Avenger does prove that. I mean, he's very consistent with this. While Jaws, it's not as consistent, but like I said, biting through a steel cable like that takes quite a bit. And then on top of that, being able to bend steel bars and breaking things like the way that he does, Jaws is pretty consistent with it. But when it comes to actual sheer strength outside of that, that's where it gets a little dicey. But once again, that comes down to movies. You're going to see this often. In the games, it would have been a little bit different. Anything like the novelization, things like that, it would have shown a little more consistency. But the movies don't show that consistency all the way. So, but he does actually, his numbers are still better. Next, we have the durability category. This one was interesting because, end of the day, Toxic Avenger is just straight up bulletproof, which is going to give him something. So you'd think the best way I thought about it was think a bulletproof vest. You're really going to take the small little impacts like that. It's different. Like, for instance, a punch itself, there's been several different accounts of people being damaged from a punch and be able to go and taking a little damage from a bullet. But the punch itself, because it covers a wider area, and just how it breaks down, it's just the punch itself will sometimes damage more against a bulletproof vest. So that's why we see, even pretty consistently, even in DC, Marvel, those bulletproof type characters, punches taking them. It just comes down to just how a punch operates versus a bullet. A bullet's more about the speed, and depending on what type of round it is, you could be going off of things like armor-piercing rounds, for instance. They operate different than just like a standard 9mm round. They'll either be hollow point or just the standard, just solid metal round. So armor piercing obviously is meant to go through things like bulletproof armor, while you got things like the standard hollow point, that's not meant for that. That's meant to go into internal damage. Excuse me. But when it comes down to it, Jaws has actually been able to survive things that are not even really debatably. Like, he's survived some things that Toxic Avenger, we've never actually seen him go against something like that. An entire building collapsing on him, giant, like I said, the battleship tier, size of, building on the water, literally had fallen all the way on him while it was exploding at the same time, and he just kind of swam out, no problem. I mean, we've never seen this, Toxic Avenger go through something like that, so we don't know, is this something he would be able to withstand or not? Would he come out damaged or not? We've seen Toxic Avenger literally go into a car, get in a car crash, thing explodes, on fire. Other guy that's in the car, he comes out all just toasty and just dies. Toxic Avenger comes out just like it was nothing. Not even a scratch on him. He's been shot at, he's been able to take it. But at the end of the day, Jaws has been able to show consistency on this at a higher level. Because this is where you start getting into jewels and all this. and Jaws has shown a greater number on that. So end of the day, Jaws seems to be a little more resilient. As for speed and agility, this is where it's pretty obvious that Toxic Avenger is going to take him. Because, well, moving 1,700 miles an hour just to, avoid gunfire, I mean, that's far, far superior to anything Jaws is going to be able to do. Jaws doesn't dodge bullets. He just kind of takes it and either runs away and then, or, comes and get you from a different angle, or he's just going to take it and just, get to you. So, while, like I said, Toxic Avenger just straight up dodges it like it's nothing. Next, we have martial prowess. This one's pretty much just a given. It's just going to go right to Jaws. Because end of the day, no training versus tons of training, or at least some training. That's going to go to him. And then after that, we go into ingenuity. Oops, wrong one. There we go. Sorry about that. It wasn't a superior advantage. I wanted to make sure that was known. It was an advantage, but not a superior advantage for martial prowess. But ingenuity, that's going to go to Jaws. He's going to have... They're both going to be utilizing the brute strength aspect and making sure that's like their main focus. But that being said, Jaws has got strategy. Toxic Avenger doesn't. He's kind of more or less run and gun, while Jaws is, all right, where can I strike to go and really just demolish my opponent as quickly as possible? Once again, for him, it would be a job. He would at least treat it that way in a fight. So he's going to want to go and have things done as quickly, as efficiently as possible. As we've seen from novelizations, video games, we've seen it from the movies. He often does this. Even when he's mentioned, that's one of the things that's mentioned. He's very, very efficient. But like I said before, he is a little clunky at times. Next, we have powers. Now, it could be argued that Jaws could have this, but I don't think so. I think it's more or less, when it comes down to powers, like who's got more powers, who's got better powers. Well, the thing is, when it comes down to who's got better powers, debatable to some degree. Who's got more powers is where Toxic Avenger is going to take it. And it's going to come down to sheer numbers. He wins on this category because, well, he can close the distance